Oh, you're muted, Nancy, if you were talking.
I just said, I made some snarky comment about her voice.
So this first step is kind of looking at your needs. What are your needs? How's, what are you trying to accomplish? Hopefully in our room, we had some good conversation about what the needs of the team were. Hopefully other rooms did as well. And then kind of the meat of it, of course, is then, what tools are the right tools? And part of this that I think a lot of organizations struggle with is you have to use the tool right. Like, even if you look at what it says on paper, you have to use the tool right in order to get the benefits that you're supposed to be getting out of it. So just because funny images are fun, I know a lot of organizations say, well, we can't use the tool right because we're unique. We're in a special situation, right? And that might be awesome and all, but you still got to use it. Just doing something different just to be different doesn't necessarily pay off, right? And I think what happens is we read a lot of white papers and things of organizations that have kind of grown past these tool sets, and that's cool. We'll talk about that later. But to grow past something, you have to grow through it too. So what I want to kind of dig into is some of these examples, and I'll tie in this whole like right tool, your needs, using it right, that kind of thing, is I just want to go through and talk about, okay, well, if we say we're going to practice Scrum, what does that really mean? Like, what are the nuts and bolts of that we're actually committing to? Same thing with Kanban, same thing with extreme programming. And then we can say, okay, that tool is the tool for the job. Now I'm going to use it correctly and get the benefits I need, from that tool. So, sorry, I'm trying to keep a quick eye on chat too. So let's start with the elephant in the room, Scrum. So one of the things to start with is, what's the purpose of Scrum? I think somewhere over here on my bookshelf, I have the ubiquitous twice the work in half the time, right? Which may be why a lot of, that one of those original books on Scrum. And I think that might be one of the reasons a lot of people buy into it, is they go, what? I get 4 times as much for my value. Awesome. Install me that. But let's hold off on that and let's set the clever title aside. What is the actual purpose of Scrum? Well, the purpose of Scrum is meant to iteratively, incrementally, and adaptively create a product, right? In particular, it's designed for solving complex problems, right? So almost any new product development is fairly complex problem. And so it uses concepts like empirical process control, product increments, continuous improvement, and bringing the problem to the team. These are some of the key concepts. For anyone who has some experience with Scrum, you may notice that these are 4 of the first things that companies drop when adopting Scrum. So it becomes very quickly like flipping that hammer over and trying to use the handle to bang the nail in, right? One of the things, for everything that I talk about on these slides, I tried to put in a guiding document. Some of these, that's a little harder to find than others. Part of that is for reference. If you look at this later and you want more details on it, right, you can always click on this. Scrum guides, I think the Scrum guide is now like, 13 pages long, right? Most of these are fairly short. So certainly if you're going to look at, am I committing my company to take this on? Well worth a 13-page read. But let's talk through some of the things. Like, what are you committing to if you say you're going to practice Scrum? I have a quick diagram here. This is it. This is all of it. This is pretty much everything that the Scrum Guide has in it in visual form, and I'll chat through it super quick. One of them is they structure a team a certain way. They have a Scrum Master. They have a product owner. Scrum Master is really focused on the health and performance of the team and improving the team. The product owner is focused on what's the right work to do. right? I'm going to spend 2 weeks doing work. What's the best way to spend those 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or what have you? Right. And then you have the developers, right? And this uses that term as like an umbrella term. Everyone who builds the product, whether that's writing code, testing, working on databases, or if you're not in software, maybe it's design or publishing or sewing costumes. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Point is, right, it uses this term developers to talk about the people who build it. And this is the core idea. It's a Scrum team, and they together are accountable for the delivery of value every single sprint, right? They own that. And there are other rules about it too that you can look into in Scrum guides, but this is the quick overview. This is what you're doing. This is what your team is, right? If you want Scrum to work like Scrum is, promises to work, like it says on the tin. You're also committing to some collaboration with stakeholders. The whole idea in Scrum is you have this product goal. Product backlogs are items of work that would get done to meet that product goal. And the Scrum team and stakeholders collaborate with each other continuously to keep refining that as you go. The goal there being you're constantly learning. You're showing the stakeholders something and learning more about their needs. They're learning more about their needs too as the product evolves. And finally, the technically correct answer is there are 5 events. That's confusing. Let's talk about these 4. Right, we're going to start, we go through these cycles of a couple of weeks. We're going to start them with a planning where we build a plan for that, for that couple of weeks. Every day we're going to get together and adjust the plan as needed, right? Because we'll learn things as we go through a couple of weeks. At the end of it, we're going to do a review. We're going to get the team together with stakeholders. We're going to show them the product as it is now, and we're going to get feedback on that product. And that feedback may change our plan for the next, right, that next cycle or sprint. And then finally, we're going to have a retrospective. Just like it's important to review and reflect on the product itself, it's important to review and reflect on our process and how our team works together, right? And so team improvement can happen, right? So I'm going to jump back to this picture. I know in my room, there were a few people who are early in this journey and they're looking at what are some of the things we should be doing. This is what you're committing to, right? If you want to use the tool right. And especially if you're just getting started with something, it is important to use the tool right. You can play with stuff later on. This is what you're committing to. And this purpose in this previous slide, this ties back to that need that we're trying to solve, right? So if you look at it and you say, hey, we've got complex problems, right? Lots of multifaceted stuff. Things change frequently. We have to be adaptive. So as the project rolls along, we're going to learn more about it, right? My brother works with a group that does all client-facing software, exactly like this, right? As soon as they show them something, the client realizes, oh my God, I was wrong about what I needed. I need this other thing. Yeah, that's, really, really, really well designed for it to take it step by step and adapt frequently, right? So if you're going, that's what my team needs, awesome. And if you can commit to that, right, that's going to be a good fit for you. Yeah, exactly. There's a note about you have to do the process to trust the process. If you second guess it right from the beginning, you'll be struggling with it the whole time. So there's Scrum. Other really big one when we're talking about the Agile umbrella. I'm not going to get into the philosophical debate about whether or not Kanban's Agile. We're at least in the same camp. So we talk about Kanban. Kanban's really interesting because people look at Kanban as an alternative to Scrum. In fact, you can use both. But I will, just like you can use a hammer and a screwdriver in the same, in the same project, you can use both, but they have different purposes. Kanban is all about optimizing a process towards a particular end. Most commonly, speed of delivery and throughput, right? Now notice it is not a process in itself. So I can apply Kanban into any process that's out there. I can even apply it to really large waterfall processes, though it's going to spotlight some really, really major things that you're going to want to change right away. But any process that's out there, if you ever go to Jimmy John's, you can actually kind of watch this in progress. They don't have a Kanban board like you usually think of, but you can watch them, and they're all set up in a line, and they all have stations, and they are fast. Like they know exactly what their process is, and you could use all of the concepts from Kanban and apply it to the way they make sandwiches, and it's actually kind of cool. So they introduced these concepts of experimental improvement, limiting work in process, right, or progress, excuse me, which is about reducing the number of things you're doing so they flow through faster, and visualizing the flow of work so that you can make that experimental improvement. I had to pick one. So I listed this particular link for a good place to go for like a definitive guide. I know there are some arguments in the Kanban world about who's got the definitive answer to what is Kanban. Don't worry about it. If you're getting started, this is a great place to start. So just like with Scrum, I want to give you a little bit of what is it. So this might sound nice. Hey, I can take any process I've got. I can say, yeah, speed of delivery is really important, or throughput's really important. I want to know how to improve that in my existing process. Maybe that's a good fit for my needs. What is it you're committing to? This might be one of the lightest ones to commit to. They simply have 6 principles and 6 practices. Easiest one, start with what you do now. Done. Whatever you do now, congratulations. You've got one of the principles taken care of. Agree amongst each other to pursue improvement through evolutionary change. That is, one step at a time, right? We're not going to revamp the whole system and do like a current state, end state, and then everything changes and everyone gets training. Just one step at a time, little by little, right? And encourage active leadership at all levels. What they mean by this is the person on the very front line is going to see different things than the manager sees, than the team lead sees, than the VP sees, right? Use all of those perspectives. Don't box yourself into one, right? Anyone can have a good idea. The 3 other principles are around delivering the product. So understand and focus on customer needs and expectations, right? That feels like maybe it should be obvious, but we get distracted with various internal concerns. Who is your team's customer? What do they need? And how do you deliver on it? And keep focused on that, right? Manage the work, let the people self-organize around it. So this is a really interesting one. It's not about keeping people busy. It's about getting things delivered, right? And then finally, this is a mouthful. Let me gear up for it. Regularly review the network of services and its policies in order to improve outcomes. Do retrospectives, right? Reflect on what's working, what's not working, keep improving it. So what you probably see coming out here in Kanban is you're starting with what you do now and finding the small improvements on it, but relentlessly pursuing those improvements. And then they have a couple practices that support this. Visualize your work. Whatever your process is, visualize it so you can watch work flow through it. Manage that flow. If things are getting caught up places, there are bottlenecks. Try to address them, right? Limit work in progress. This is a rabbit hole, so I'm going to give you a quick version of it. You can look at queuing theory and Little's law for a lot more detail, but basically, if you plot how much work in progress you have, there's a bell curve. On the short end of that bell curve, you're doing like one thing, and then in wait states and stuff, you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs, and it's not very efficient. On the other side of the bell curve, you're overwhelmed. There are too many things. You're spending more time trying to figure out, like trying to manage your tasks than you are actually doing your tasks. You want to find that sweet spot. Limiting that work in progress helps you find that sweet spot. That's, I don't know, we could talk for hours about work in progress. That's the short version of it. But you got to do it. You make policies explicit. So how do I know something's ready for QA? Try it sometime. Go to a team that's never done any of this before and say, how do I know this thing is done? And ask them to write up a list. And I guarantee you every single team member will give you a different list, right? So one of the things Kanban says, instead of ending up in that situation where I don't know, is it ready to go from requirements to development? Write it down, come to the agreement. Don't have 5 different people have 6 different answers to that question. Implement feedback loops, right? I want to hear what's going on, what's working, what's not working. That's feedback loops on the process, feedback loops on the product. And then finally, and this ties into that one principle, improve collaboratively, evolve experimentally. So on a regular basis, we get together and say, we all see this happening. I think if we tried this, it could improve it in this way. Let's try it for a couple of weeks and see. And if it does, we'll keep that practice in place. If it doesn't, we'll go back to the drawing board, right? So we'll collaborate on our improvement and we'll do it experimentally so we prove that the changes we make are effective and meaningful and benefit our process and they don't simply become bureaucracy and red tape. So again, like I said, for these, what I wanted to do here is give a little bit of a, this is the need it's fulfilling, right? It's that it's starting with where you're at and optimizing towards a goal. This is what you're committing to. There's a link for reference in there. And then what I want to do is I'm going to share another one. I'm going to give a lighter touch to it because it's not as big of a player anymore. I think because Scrum does a lot of it. And that's extreme programming, but it's out there and it's really cool. Ooh, I didn't give credit. Adam Weisbert is the owner and creator of that graphic. And I have a t-shirt with it on, which is what led me to put it in here. So extreme programming was in the really, really early days of any of this whole agile movement thing. And you might notice there are some terms up there if you've been practicing any type of agile for a little while in the software world, you might recognize things like user stories and continuous integration, right? The ideas of cyclical development, like we see inside of Scrum, a lot of those were being messed with originally inside of extreme programming. You also see this listed as XP, right? Because that was back in the 90s where everything extreme started with an X for some reason. So what's the purpose of this? You know, if you look at the structure of it, it's a lot of the work management and time management and team management, that kind of thing is very, very similar to Scrum. You see a lot of connections there, but it was really focused on building software. And where Scrum's a framework, extreme programming is a methodology. Really focused on building software and a high degree of software craftsmanship. Right. So, so this is interesting. And I wanted to put this in here because Scrum left this big hole in the middle of it of how to do the work. And my understanding from people who are there from the early days is part of the reason for that is they felt like someone else already solved that problem. And that was extreme programming. And so it's important to go back to, and of course, right, so many people use user stories. They come from extreme programming. You know, we have DevOps, you know, their continuous integration and continuous development. All the roots of that are in DevOps started in extreme programming, right? And it's very, very focused on how do I build great software. And so if that's some of your need is figuring out how to build great software, it's a good place to look, right? And like I said, I don't want to go into as deep. I mean, I borrowed this from the website that I listed there, extremeprogramming.org. I just borrowed the screenshot from it because they have this really nice overview. Can you tell it's made by programmers? Definitely not a marketing person anywhere in that team. Yeah. So, and I don't think it's changed since like 1998. I don't know. But hey, it works. It does the job. And if you go to their website, you can really easily find all this stuff. But what you see here, right, planning. Hey, I'm doing these small releases. We work in iterations. We start in iteration planning at the beginning of each iteration. Right? Yeah, it's absolutely clear. Lot of things that are really similar to Scrum, the importance of simplicity. And then, of course, Scrum borrows things like spikes, like user stories from here. But then what you also see is on the right-hand side, much more specificity about how you actually do the work, right? Customers always available. So they don't have a product owner in extreme programming. There's a customer who's actually there and available to talk to from the team. You have to have code standards. You have to have unit tests being developed first, and then you code to those unit tests. You do pair programming on everything. Constant continuous integration, right? Real collective ownership. Everyone is supposed to own every part of the code, right? And when we talk about testing, it demands unit tests. When a bug is found, tests are created around it. We always have acceptance tests, and those are automated, right? So a lot more disciplined about how you build the software. Is that necessarily bad? I don't know. If you look at it and go, oh my God, our software is a mess. Every time we write something, we get more bugs than we get features. Well, maybe a little bit of software discipline is exactly what your team needs. So maybe that's exactly the right tool for you. So I put a bunch of this stuff on here. And what I want to do, this is not comprehensive by any means, right? We could write this out for, even for waterfall. What are the things that waterfall tries to hit, and what are they, introducing phase gates, and what are the benefits of that, right? There are definitely places where waterfall is the right fit, right? Especially in very well-known, well-defined spaces. Could write plenty of more of these, but these at least give you 3 to kind of look at. I'm going to go out into breakout rooms again.
Did you say waterfall?
Yeah. not necessarily in the Agile umbrella, right? But if we're building houses in modern times, right? That's so well established that unless you're doing something really interesting and creative with the house, waterfall brings a lot of benefits, right? As a rule, if you can have a defined process that if you follow it actually gets you the result you want, that's the caveat, right? It can be one of the most efficient ways to get there. Right? Of course, we ended up at Agile.
I just had to give you a little bit of a hard time.
Oh, absolutely.
Coming out of a manufacturing project where parts of that project absolutely needed to be waterfall, and some of the technical parts needed to, use Scrum and other things. So anyway, it's still out there, alive and well.
And and you could get into like Lean Six Sigma and like all kinds of other things. So that's the perfect lead in to the next slide. And this is why we're gonna go out into breakout rooms again, but I like you to talk about this a little bit, is you can mix and match. My usual, it may be exactly like what you said. Hey, this segment of this work, waterfall is the right thing. It's predictable. It's the same process over and over again. And control and lack of variation is the more important thing than like innovation or rapid learning or that kind of thing. But then I have these other parts of that need that rapid learning, need that innovation, where waterfall is going to hinder us. So there might be places where I need this over here and I need this over here. I also might actually it can be okay to pull specific practices out. The warning I usually give with this is like, so for example, I might say I'm practicing Scrum and I'm going to practice Scrum. I'm going to try that framework as it is, but I love user stories. And that doesn't mean I'm going to commit wholesale into XP, but I am going to use user stories because I like what that one practice brings. It creates empathy with customers and I love it. And I like that. And so I'm going to bring that into my Scrum environment. So you can do a little bit of that, and that's okay. What I'd love for you to talk about in your breakout rooms is we just talked about extreme programming and Kanban and Scrum, and I want you to think back to those needs you talked about and share with the other people in the room, how did those resonate for you? which of those feel like that seems closest to my needs, or maybe that's really close to my needs, but I love this practice over here that sounds spot on. Chat, and I'll give me a quick thumbs up if you feel like that 5 minutes was a good amount of time, and I don't think we can do thumbs down, so just don't click anything if you feel like it needs more.
And I actually went a little, I think we were a few minutes, not a few minutes, but a little bit over 5 minutes. So
Okay.
everybody's good.
So maybe we'll make it an actual 6 or 7 minutes for this. Let people a little bit of time to chat through it and maybe ask each other questions, pick each other's brains about what's worked and not worked for them as well. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Here we go, folks.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna join you. I thought it would randomize, but it looks like it's keeping the same people. So
It's fine.
it's all right. I had a good talk with you all, so I thought I'll just join you again. And we kind of actually, I thought it was funny. Maybe we got ahead of ourselves and we talked about that a little bit earlier, right? Like, like, with me, DevOps using Kanban and, yeah, so what was interesting to me and what I want to ask him about actually is his thoughts on, maybe share your thoughts on the picking apart, right? The cherry picking. Well, we'll use this from here and this from here and this in Scrum and all that, right? And like the first thing that came into my mind was, it's okay to do that, as he said. And what I was wanting to say is it depends on the motive, right? So if you're, for instance, we have a couple of Scrum teams that don't like the arbitrary deadline, the time box of 2 weeks. So they want to be Kanban because they're struggling to get their work done and commit and be predictable within a 2 week time box. So so that's something that would be fun to talk about that. And what are the reasons that you're picking and choosing? Is it to avoid something?
Right.
Yeah.
I've heard that same argument, Nancy.
Yep.
And
the classic.
yeah, I kind of early on as a Scrum Master, I learned that that it was good to just let the pain be where it was, to indicate what needed some attention.
Yeah.
Early on, it was such a natural inclination to try to get around the pain somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, cherry pick.
Yeah.
And so, I did learn the lesson that let the pain be there.
That's right.
It's useful.
Yep. Let it become visible. Exactly.
Right.
What do you think, Chris? What do you think about the cherry picking and combining and all that?
Yeah, I think what you talked about before is I think you need to know the rules before you break them.
Yeah.
And then I think and then have a reason for doing it. I early in my career, I did data warehousing, and there were different frameworks for that. And some people just wanted to go do it on their own, which is fine. But if you at least looked at the two major frameworks, then you had, hundreds of man years or people years put into it, which is probably better than any individual could come up with. But then, there might be some things you want to do different. So kind of don't reinvent the wheel, but modify a little.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another, I always like to use analogies when I can to, when I'm talking to the teams about these things. And I always think about, it kind of goes back to the, cherry picking what you want to use. And here's a framework that was developed. It's been proven to work, to be effective, right? And it's like, I don't know, like learning a sport, or when the fundamentals, and you need to learn the fundamentals right? Before you start messing around with, before,
Yeah.
like even, I don't know, weightlifting or something, right? You have to learn proper form in performing a squat, for instance, right? And
Yeah.
if you don't get that down, you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So
Same thing with music. Like you need to learn your scales and you need to learn all of the basics before you go do improvisation.
right.
Or it's going to be a mess.
Yep. Yeah. That's absolutely perfect. Yeah. Yeah, that works. I don't know what else did he ask us? I think we addressed the.
I think that was it. I do have a kind of a question. When I was doing work with Microsoft, we were talking about, for the same team, do both Scrum and Kanban, and it wasn't to the point of Scrum bomb.
Kanban. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't that. It was like, if bugs came in, then they would be, and it was the same people. If bugs came in, we do Kanban. Everything else, we wanted to commit to the 2 weeks, so we do Scrum.
Oh, I see.
But we never did progress to that because it seemed, and other teams were doing Kanban, so they didn't want us to be different.
Okay.
So we never really
that.
came up with a solution to that.
Yeah.
We tried that too. For one PI, we had a kind of a feature team and we just carved out, say, like 20% capacity. You work on defects in a Kanban fashion.
Yeah.
It was complicated to manage that, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, and the percentage, and we ended up doing that anyway. We'd say one person, oh gosh, your stuff, you're going to need 40% sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it just always never seemed to work out. Never enough percentage added to it. And
yeah, I've seen it done both ways. I've seen it done where one person on the team, like per iteration, or
yes.
PI, one person is like the fireman. And they handle all the defects, right?
So they can just deal with that when everybody else can be head down on the
exactly, right?
Yeah,
and it rotates or something.
You write that down.
Yeah, the firefighter or something. And then the other thing that we do, it's a little sloppy just because we have to work on it. It's not easy, but we have expedited. So we have our regular, like our team board, our Kanban board, and we move the work across right through the normal workflow. But then we have an expedited lane where things that are hot and have to be worked right away are in that expedited lane.
Yeah.
However, what happens is what's supposed to happen is the team rallies around that thing that's in the expedited lane. Like that's an emergency. That should be something that's really urgent. And the whole team should rally around that. Everything else is on hold until that thing is resolved. But unfortunately, a lot of times people just continue doing their regular work, and while somebody else works on that, so it's a little bit, it doesn't always work so well.
Yeah, and we tried doing that, and we would but something had to be taken out.
Mm-hmm.
If you committed to these 10 user stories, and something came in that was expedited, it was okay. What leaves?
Well, then what leaves, right?
Yeah.
That's,
And fortunately, at that point, we had the director's support. In fact, he requested.
Oh, that's good.
Because he, it's like things change. We can be flexible.
That's good.
Doesn't mean just be committed to it that we pilot new work that now you have to do everything plus this new stuff.
Yeah.
That's
and what we
agile.
And you can't. Like what we do for our PI plannings, right? And even for our iterations, right? We leave buffer, right? So we know the work is going to come in. We know there's going to be emergent work. And so we don't plan to 100% capacity.
Yeah.
We leave room. So that's another way to look at that. That's cool. Cool stuff. What do we got? 5. Okay. So I'm probably going to bring everybody back here. And I will see you back in the room. Another great chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I don't know why she has to say that every time.
I'm going to finish my sentence to Chris. If you Google up static and you find some specific, like, hey, this is how you facilitate doing a static workshop, that might take you in the general direction. And if it doesn't, email me and I can provide you some more. Sorry, just finishing up a thing.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully in your conversations, right, talked about what are some of the needs that, again, I want to tie this back to what are the needs you have. Yes, constraints are important. If someone's not going to do something, then it doesn't matter that even if it is what they should do, or even if it is the best thing, if they're not going to do it and they're not going to commit to it, well, that's a constraint and you have to acknowledge that. But at least my recommendation is always start with the need and which of these tools feels like it hits your need more effectively. Oh, I don't think I'm sharing again, am I?
Not yet.
No, we're just seeing your pretty face, which is nice.
Excellent. There it is.
So
I'm not sure that's much better.
So the next thing I want to mention, just because I mentioned this at the beginning, and you see this all over the place. Companies who have been doing this for a really long time, they're going to outgrow their frameworks, and you should outgrow your framework. That framework is a great starting place. But what's going to happen is once you really master the mechanics of it, it's not perfectly suited for your context. It's not perfectly suited for your environment. And so once you get everything that the out of the box is going to give you, then you start playing with it. Then you start tweaking things, and you can evolve that, just like Kanban says about evolving experimentally. You can go, okay, we have the discipline. We can do it like it says in the book, and we get everything that we want. But I think if I tweak this a little bit, I get a little bit more, right? And this is where companies start growing past their framework. And this should be a goal for every company. No company's goal should be to just sit in Scrum forever. Find the next thing past that that's going to work for you and no one else, right? That's where a lot of the big competitive advantage out of your process comes from. So I want to put that out there. Yes, you should absolutely, that should eventually be your goal. But again, you have to grow through your framework to get there. If you can't do it as it says, then probably anything you're changing is more based on what's easier to do than what pays off better. And that's a broad generalization, but that's what I see most often. So we're right about 7:12, and I know I would leave time for questions. So what I'm going to do, the next couple of slides, I just, more than anything else, maybe they're for reference, but I wanted to include a couple of things about scaling frameworks. And all I really included was some basics to get you started. And hopefully you can look at these guiding documents, you can dig more into them, but hopefully you can, when you think about your needs, what are your needs of your company? So the first one I put on here is LeSS. And the purpose of LeSS is to scale multiple teams. You also have multiple teams working on the same product with as little overhead as possible, right? Keep it simple. So they have this idea of there's a single product owner across all of those teams. We have cross-team Scrum events. So instead of everyone's got their Scrum events and then everyone's got all these other events on top of it, you actually have a lot of cross-team Scrum events, which forces a highly collaborative development process across all of the teams, right? They have a picture, and it looks like this. And you can kind of see like each of these teams is working, but they're all tied into kind of the similar sprint planning, and they get together and do a collective review and an overall retrospective. They have one product owner and one potentially shippable increment, right? So again, your needs, if you go, well, I've got 4 teams working on delivering this product, but it's one product, and I don't want a ton of overhead on top of it. I just want these 4 teams to work together. Maybe it's a great fit for exactly what you need. I included, oops, I got ahead of myself. I included this, just I felt bad just having very Scrum specific stuff. Kanban flight levels. If you're using Kanban, you go, well, that's great. All my teams use Kanban to improve their team processes. But what about our portfolio? What about our organization? What about our strategic objectives, right? Take a look at flight levels. It's all about how do I apply that same Kanban process to improve how I work on a portfolio. And frankly, even if you're using Scrum on your teams and you have no process for portfolio, maybe looking at their, some of their flight level 2 and 3 would really help that cross-team coordination and keeping focused on your company's strategy, and applying a little bit of agile mentality into even if you're using Scrum teams, right? And finally, I try to give this one. SAFe gets a lot of flack in the agile world, and it's not unwarranted, but they also bring a lot of interesting things into it. SAFe says its purpose is to enable the business agility that is required for enterprises to compete and thrive in the digital age. And if that doesn't help you know whether or not it meets your needs, that's the problem with SAFe. SAFe tries to be everything to everyone, and that's what makes it hard to really tie to. But I encourage people, give it a fair shake. There are things that they really try to do. They have a great website that makes it easy to explore, but they have ideas of release trains where a bunch of teams work together to deliver increment of value. Now it's over a longer period of time, but it's still a bunch of teams working together to deliver an increment of value. That's not nothing by any means. And if right now you're looking at year-long releases, it's a great next step. It's a really full toolbox. One of the things they try to do is take all of the best ideas from around the agile world and pull it together in one thing. It's probably its best strength and its biggest weakness. I'll show you a picture from their website that illustrates this. By the way, I put their website right there. So it is a great website. You can it has this map and you can click through all of it and see all the pieces, and it's awesome. It's like the opposite of the XP website. This is SAFe. Everyone got it? Yeah. So like I said, its greatest strength and its biggest weakness. It's meant to be massively robust. It can handle projects with hundreds of teams all working on it together, using Kanban and Scrum and some XP stuff and then some proprietary things and working in architectural epics and so in its robustness, we also have its difficulty. So I wanted to give it a fair shake. And if you've never looked at SAFe before, and this looks overwhelming, here's a much nicer picture. They have this idea of like essential SAFe, which is a lot less scary, right? There's a bunch of things on there, but this looks at least manageable as a place to start from, right? So I got to be honest with you. If you're going to look at SAFe, please take some time with someone who lives and breathes SAFe. Take some time to talk about it and talk about your needs. Like I said, they bring everything in the kitchen sink to the table, and that's its strength, but it also means you got to sort through that. And if you're new to scaling Agile, bring in someone. That's not a sales plug. That's not me. I am not a SAFe expert. So yeah. I have seen Melissa has posted something in the chat. I have seen some really good coaches do some really amazing things with SAFe. So I won't trash talk it. But get one of those people. You get one of those people who has done it to help you through. It's not a light journey to be taken on willy-nilly. So. And with that, I think I really want to, like I said, we'll leave a little bit of time for questions. There's a ton of information there. We'll share the slides. I put in every single one of them, your overview, but also links to the official source for these things so you can dig as deep as you want. And yeah, you know, the main thing I hope you take away from here is start with your needs, then match up what tools were designed for those kind of needs, and then see what you can commit to and put your constraints in. You're going to end up in a lot better place. Thoughts, questions?
I actually have something. I'm curious about your thoughts on it. I've heard it said that between Scrum and Kanban, and as you mentioned, Kanban might be a little simpler of a framework. However, it's by some Agilists can also considered more difficult than Scrum.
Right.
More disciplined.
Yeah.
To do it well is much harder. Yes.
Much harder. So I'm just kind of curious as to your, why do you think that?
I missed who said it, but I'm in complete agreement.
Much harder.
Yeah, it's a discipline thing, right?
It was Mark.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
I'm
you,
sorry.
Mark. And I don't know, maybe you want to weigh in, Mark? I've talked a bunch already.
Well, for me, I forgot what we were talking about, honestly. Crap.
Kanban being tougher than Scrum.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Kanban is tougher than Scrum because it's hard to build a predictability model. So leadership thinks, oh, they're doing Scrum because they're lazy or they just don't want to commit to something and they just want to do it willy-nilly as it comes in. So it's a harder sell, and therefore it has a higher bar to prove itself. Right? So you've got to practice whip limits. You got to have, look at Little's Law. You've got to continuously improve. You have to get swim lanes and try to predict anything coming into the process, predict how long it will take for it to get out. Right? And so you can just go really deep into Kanban and get it really robust and refined. Whereas Scrum is kind of, you can do it by the book and you're good.
Yeah. Nicole asked about, less safe flight level, is there an appropriate size organization for it? And they all kind of approach that different ways. So I'll hit less and safe real quick. Less is really designed for like 10 teams or less on a particular project, or excuse me, on a particular product. They've added in this thing called less huge, which extends it a little bit for bigger groups. And I have to admit, I haven't worked with less huge. I've worked with less plenty of times. My very, very subjective feeling is it's a bolt-on. Like they've just added this extra thing on to say that they handle more. Craig Larman will swear by it. He's one of the creators of it, but I gotta be honest, I'm not sold. That said, I've worked with some really big companies, and I think I've worked with one that had more than 10 teams on a single product. So for most contexts, that's going to be okay. And if you're working on like multiple products, then that might be fine for like these 9 teams use it with this product and these 8 teams use it with this product. Safe tackles that problem a little bit differently. If you look at their website, they have these like versions of it, like the ones I showed. Essentials is meant for, hey, you have a small number of teams, and then there's a large solution where you have a bigger number of teams, and so on and so forth, until you get up to the full implementation, which they say has been successful across hundreds of teams working on a single product. Again, I sorry, my skepticism comes in when the marketing gets too heavy, but yeah, Safe now, and Safe went the other way. Safe started as the whole thing and then worked its way back for groups that don't need so much for Safe. And then when we're talking about, I'll mention when we're talking about flight levels, this is applied just like Kanban. You're applying a Kanban approach to whatever your process is for managing your portfolio, managing your strategic objectives. So the success of that will be more dependent on the success of the thing you're applying it, whatever the underlying process you're applying it towards is. And I'm curious, Kim has a hand up. I'm wondering, Kim has a lot more knowledge on Safe actually than I do, so she might have some good thoughts there.
Actually, I wasn't going to mention Safe.
what I was going to mention is what I've noticed in the last couple of years is other scaling modalities like Scrum at Scale, as well as a Spotify method, have been becoming more popular with larger companies as well. So there's other things out there to consider. So wanting to give you that, seed planting, and Scrum at Scale does say that they scale for as large of the organization as you have, although I think I've only seen it scale to a couple of levels is for most companies. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Thank you both.
I saw Rich had a question about frameworks that work well. This is in Internet of Things. There's a mix of hardware, firmware, mobile software teams, and the fact that they can't necessarily estimate each other's work. They might not even be able to. They might not be able to do each other's work. And I'm reading that Scrum work best. It is tough, right? Anytime you have a group of people, I don't know that something else is going to work better. The nice thing about Scrum is it doesn't tell you how to organize your work, and so that I think that's a strength in this particular case. I've worked in the case where you have hardware and software. Like I've worked as an engineer on those teams. I also worked with Scrum Alliance, and their Scrum teams had marketing, content writing, software developers, and testers, and education experts, and like really, really crazy diverse teams. And what they had to do, the thing was, they would say, we're going to build this increment of our product, and that requires us to use all of these different skills. Right. And they just had to really, it had to be much more collaborative and very trusting that if someone said they could deliver this, that they could, because there wasn't a lot of opportunity to help out across, so that's definitely a harder situation, but Scrum at least creates a container for it. I don't think XP might be a little too prescriptive towards software development. That might give you some hangups there. And of course, Kanban, right? Again, you can apply it towards any process, but you're going to need an underlying process that supports that team working together. And if you don't have that already, that might be really tough.
You are right
that's
about
not
it.
the perfect answer by any means.
No, you are
Daniel,
right
I have a
about
question.
creating
This is
trust.
Vishal.
Rich
Rich,
was
what was your response? And then I think Vishal had
Yeah, the absolute key is that you actually have to have the team build a product end to end once, or at least a subset, so that there's absolute trust that people can estimate their time, or that people understand that they have to multiply by 3.1 on estimates for the same person. Then it starts to click. But thank you for your talk.
Yeah. I think Vishal had something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have one question. Currently, I'm working for a healthcare domain client as a Scrum Master. So we have multiple trains, and we have a solution train. I'm part of the newly launched train. So what odd thing that I'm observing over here, that we have earlier trains which are in place. We have back-end train and we have front-end train. Okay, and in our train we have back-end teams and front-end teams. So coming with a few years of agile experience, and I have also done SPC in the past and multiple Scrum Alliance certifications. So what I'm seeing that evidently they have introduced the constraint of backend and frontend, and they have not implemented from the start the feature teams, right? And so instead of left shift approach, advocating left shift, when the industry is advocating left shift approach, we are evidently going for or adopting right shift in everything, right? So I have proposed this, that this is something which is odd. However, this is what it is, and this has worked earlier. So something which have worked for them, now for the entire space, it is really difficult to unlearn that and learn this feature team approach, right? Because even if they also know that this might be better approach, now they don't want to leave something which is working for them. So what are your thoughts, suggestions to work in a more better way in such spaces? Or
Yeah, so there's I hope it's okay to keep answering this question, Nancy.
Yeah.
I'll make it not too long. Okay, so there are a couple things in what you're asking. Obviously, like you're pointing out, you know, there's an anti-pattern there that to deliver a feature, I need two different trains to both deliver, right? And that creates this really tight dependency, which is frustrating, adds work, that kind of thing. So that's there. I don't know how useful that is, right? Because people already want it. So the two questions I hear are maybe one, how do I motivate them to want something different? And then two, how do I start helping them get to a different place? And the first one, I'm just going to create another slide here real quick. So just so I can type something on the screen. There's something called Dan Miller's formula for change that I like to use. It says, just let me type.
It should not say that change should start from me and I should wear the hat.
No. So
Or
Dan
else I will
Miller's
be a
formula for
odd man.
change, it's not, let me see if it's letting me do it now.
Sorry for the intervention.
All right. I don't know what's going on. Slides is being difficult. It says that to overcome a resistance to change, you need a dissatisfaction with the status quo, a vision for the future, and concrete first steps, right? And so what you're calling out is that there's no dissatisfaction with the status quo. And so how people fabricate dissatisfaction is stick something in front of someone that they want, but they can't have it because of their current circumstance. And now the fact that they can't have it makes them dissatisfied with the status quo. So to create that, you say, oh, it would be great if we can do this, but this is why that's not going to work with a front end back end split. Now, I have a vision of the future. That's no problem. Concrete first steps. How do I actually get there? Might be something like borrowing some of these ideas from Les. Hey, let's have both train when we do our PI planning. Let's do a collaborative PI planning. So we're each going to have our own things that we do on our trains, but because we do that PI planning together, we know what we need from each other as we go. And so instead of us working side by side or one after the other, we're going to work in lockstep and constantly communicate back and forth with each other, right? So if you have the dissatisfaction, you can have this if we do something a little different. And here are some first steps to start doing it a little different. That can start moving it. That's a longer, that's a long game, right? That's a long process. It took a long time to put that in place, and it's going to take a while. But if you keep an eye out for that, thing that they're not going to get if they keep it separate, and then you can capitalize on that and then prove out, look, this is why it's worthwhile. So you can use this small step to kind of prove out why it's worthwhile to bring those two together and have a more of a feature delivery approach. I know that's way easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we are saying that I will be the change agent should be keeping an eye on the dissatisfaction element. At the same time, the entire space will be working towards proving correct, right? So there will be constant friction. I think. I will.
Don't take it all on yourself, right? Find some friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who feel the way you do.
Yeah, absolutely. We need those.
Yeah, build an
Thanks.
army.
Yeah.
Thank you for that guideline.
Yeah.
What other questions, comments for Daniel? That was awesome. I think it's great to go back. I was just thinking, it's great to go back to the basics sometimes. You know, we get so far down different paths, and I think that this was a great refresher.
Cool. I appreciate it.
I agree. It was nice to bring it down to the basics again.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.